Hello, so in this video we're going to start talking about if statements. Now, if statements are really useful because, for example, if we just need to test whether a condition is true, then we might want to do a couple of things. So we might run through a piece of code, we then get to a point and the computer asks, right, if this statement is true, then do this, otherwise do this. Okay, so it's literally going through and it's saying, if a statement is true, do this, if not, do this. Okay, we don't tend to write otherwise all the time. We just tend to write else. Okay, but let's come up with a function that determines the sign of a number, or tells us the sign of a number. So let's just call a function sign and tell it is a function. Function. And let's open and close the brackets, and then the user needs to put in an input. So we can call that input whatever we like, but let's just say that input is X. It doesn't have to be a letter, it can be a name, it can be anything you like. Okay, let's open and close those curly brackets to say that's how long I want the function to last for. Everything that happens between those curly brackets, remember, the function does. And then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up my if statement. So I'm going to say if my input X, so the user will put in an input, is less than 0. So notice I'm setting up my if statement exactly the same as I've set up my loops and exactly the same as I've set up my functions. I need to put a couple of parentheses in. Then anything that goes between those parentheses, that's the statement which I want to test and see whether it's true. So I'm going to say if the value which I put in is less than 0, then this is what I'm going to do. And again, I need to put my curly brackets, so new line, there's my curly brackets, and then this is what I'm going to tell the computer is true. So if it's less than 0, then that means it must be a negative number, so I'm just going to print negative number. Now I need to put the words negative number, if I can spell number, in quotation marks. The reason being is because it needs to be text. Okay, it's not. I need to tell R that it mustn't treat it as a label. It mustn't treat it as a vector. It's not a function. It's nothing like that. It is just simply text that I just want to print. Okay. Well, otherwise, if that's not the case, so else, don't need to put any other statements in, because remember, all it says is if that first statement is true, do this. Otherwise, do this. I don't need to then test another statement. Else, well, I want it to print, well, it's not technically positive, because if it's less than 0, remember, then it's a negative number, but otherwise it could be positive or 0. So technically it's a non-negative number. Okay, so yeah, that should work. So let's press source. So basically, let's just run through the kind of the thing which the computer is doing, what R is doing. So I've set sign to be the name of my function, and I'm going to let the user put a value for X in. Okay. Then what I do is I test. I say if that value which the user has put in is less than 0, then I want R to print the words negative number. Otherwise, well, it must be either 0 or positive, so therefore I want it to print non-negative number. So let's just see where this works. So I'm going to put sign, I'm going to open my brackets, and then I'm just going to choose a value to put in. So let's put in, for example, let's put in the number 5. Okay, and let's press enter. Okay, it's come up as a non-negative number, which is true. It's positive. Okay, let's just test to make sure it does definitely print the other one as well. So let's put in a negative number. Let's put sign of -5. Oops. The reason why I did that is because R thought it wanted me to reprint sign, print that, and it comes out as a negative number. Great. Okay. So the thing is, this non-negative number business, I'd prefer it to print either positive or 0. So what I can do then is I can use this idea called an else if statement. So if I actually just get rid of what I've written there with the else. Now the else if statement basically says if that first statement is true, then I can then test another statement. So else if this is true, so it goes through and it says if X is less than 0, then do this. If it's not true, then test this statement. So else if X is greater than 0, then I want it to print this. So again, I'm going to open my curly brackets. So I'm going to print, then it must be positive number, because remember it wasn't, if I'm running this sort of section of the code, it means that X wasn't less than 0. So, so positive number. So what I'm literally doing there is if X is less than 0, print negative number. If that wasn't true, then move on to the next thing. So test the next statement. Else if this is true, so else if X is greater than 0, then print the words positive number. Okay, and then finally, if neither of the two above were true, else, open my curly brackets, I want it to print 0. Okay, Great. So let's source that and make sure that works. So we've sourced that. Let's put our function, which is sine. Let's first of all put our value of 5 in. Great, that comes out as a positive number now. Okay, let's just double check that it does come out as 0. So let's put in the sine of 0. Oops, done the same thing again. Sine of 0, and then that comes back as 0. So great. So that basically works. So if statements are really useful. It basically goes through and it says, if this is true, then do this. Else, if this is true, then do this. Else, if none of the above were true, then do this. So it basically gives you lots of statements which you can work with, and you can basically tell the computer to do certain things depending on the conditions which you're given.